John Smith. I'm with Lawrence Group Projects. I'm president of ASPE. Welcome for the attendees in person and the ones that are virtual. Appreciate you hanging on. We've had some snafus here at the AGC for the technical difficulties. And hopefully next month we will have those worked out since they look like they changed up on us. Anyway, today's meeting is on forecasting futures in the stock market is what I think Cameron's going to talk about. But it's about the construction, obviously. So Cameron's got a lot to get done. I want to run through some quick things. We have our monthly meeting right now. Next month's meeting will be a week earlier to be the second Friday, which is the 12th of November. And Cameron will be putting on part 2 of this. Along with some other things. We are also holding the Central Plains Regional Meeting tonight and tomorrow. Tonight's the open welcome reception down at the Holiday Inn in Festus tonight from 6 to 9. Anybody's welcome to come down there, even though you're not signed up for the regional meeting. I'd appreciate some of the members that live south to probably swing by. 6 to 9, it's at the AGC, is at the Holiday Inn in Festus. Anyway, that's today, and then tomorrow morning is the regional meeting, and then we have a wine tour and a dinner that Freddie is taking care of and setting up for us. Other than that, then the following weekend, the 23rd, is a trivia night. And if I recall right, we have one table left. We have CNR signed up last night for a table. So I think we have one table left, just so everybody's aware of that. That's on the call and on the meeting here. Other than that, I'll get back up here when Cameron gets done, but I appreciate Cameron going ahead and taking away with the meeting. When you get close to the end, okay.
When I get close to the end?
Yeah.
I'm about at the end.
Okay.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Let's see if we can get through some of the technical issues here. And just so you know, I'm going to be kind of since this is a 2-part series, it's going to be kind of starting. You okay, John?
Yeah, I was just going to say, people in here, pick it up on your phone, probably. That's what I was going to just go get it off your phone.
So I'm going to be kind of starting from a 10,000 foot level, which is, a lot of stuff that's in the news. You hear construction starts, construction spending. So I'm going to be looking at construction as a whole and forecasts and what kind of goes into those big numbers. And then next month is part 2. We're going to really drill down into some more of the details, especially when it comes to inflationary stuff and material procurement and what have you. So again, my name's Cameron Beattie. I'm a pre-construction executive with Russell HBD. Russell HBD is fairly new, as a lot of people don't really know about us, but HBD's been around for 100 years here in St. Louis. Russell 1 year ago, like in another couple weeks, merged with them. Russell's home office is up in Davenport, Iowa, and we're growing the St. Louis office, the regional office. Little shameless plug here on the screen about what Russell HBD does. Some of the values that we have, some of the markets that we hit, which is pretty much every market. So on to forecasting futures. It's what we do every day as estimators. Basically, we forecast what the cost of a project's going to be when they actually do the job. It's what we do every day. When it comes to estimating, it really boils down to about 5 basic inputs: quantity, price of materials, price of labor, how long does it take to install, and any special equipment or tools needed. You can boil estimating down to pretty much those 5 items. If you can forecast what that is and do it successfully, you'll be good at estimating. Thing is that estimating and all this is all based off of historic data. When you go and you estimate something, you say, oh, last time we did it, it took 2 man-hours to install this. So I'm going to put 2 man-hours in to install it. So it's all based on historic data. So, oops, sorry. It's only as good as the data is that you're basing it on, right? So this last August, I ended up going down to the Dallas Advancing Pre-Construction Conference. And it was a 3-day, or it was a long conference, but there was some really good aspects to it. There were some things that I probably would have stepped away from knowing what I know now. But one of the really impactful talks that I sat through was by a gentleman named Ed Zorenski. And if you don't know Ed Zorenski and his website, you're going to get familiar with all his documents, because that was pretty much the main research that I did for this talk. And in fact, I actually had some correspondence with him about some things. So he is fully aware that I basically used all his data for this. So the thing about Ed is he's retired. He was Gilbane. You know, he did estimating for years and years, and he did huge mega jobs. And with these numbers and the data that goes into all this stuff, you can really geek out on this stuff and end up going down a bunch of rabbit holes and like, what's that mean? And then 2 hours later, you're still on the same article. But, you know, Ed tends to, probably not the best term to use, but tends to dumb it down a little bit for the non-economist, standard person. So I really do like the way he presents it. His website is free. It's edzorensky.com. I would, if this interests you at all, and the stuff that he does pull in a lot of his information from other sites as well, but it's definitely worth a look. So why do we need to forecast the future? Well, future projects, we want to know where the market's going. We want to know where the trends are, what's hot. So I don't know if anybody remembers, back a number of years ago, there was a management book that was kind of all the cat's meow that, management wanted you to read and do is, who moved my cheese? So the company that's sitting there that's in one specific market and that market's hot, that's great. But if you're not flexible and you stay in that market and that market goes down the hill, you're going downhill with it. Business development. Back into who moved my cheese. So think of it this way. If 10 years ago, if you were doing shopping malls, things probably didn't look so bad, right? But if you're trying to do shopping malls right now, you're probably struggling, right? So you got to be able to forecast where the market's going to be going. 10 years ago, if you were trying to do just multifamily, you were probably hurting a little bit. Right now, you're swimming in it, right? Business development wants to know where they should be focusing their efforts, their resources, so that they're trying to hit the jobs that are going to be coming out, the markets for the jobs that are going to be coming out. So these are the needs of why we're forecasting. So what data do we use when we're looking at the forecasting? It's a gazillion things, but here's some of the top ones. I'm sure everybody gets the AGC data digest report. It comes out frequently. Beige Book, the Commerce Report, Construction Analytics, Architectural Building Index, Dodge Data, Construct Connect, US Consensus. Those are kind of the main ones that a lot of people use. there's lots of source, and how it's all compiled is, that's where you got to kind of make sure that you're not overlooking things. You can just look at a headline and be like, oh, wow, but you really got to know what's behind the headline. So one of the first things you need to make sure you do is you've got to understand where the construction cost is located. So if you're interested in one specific market, you need to make sure you know where that market is as it's broke down into these costs and spending and all these stats, because they're all grouped into little packages, right? So construction starts versus construction's cost located. So really the big, this is the main indicators to predict or forecast that I would say the industry really looks at is construction starts, construction costs, which is construction spend. So we use this a lot. So we need, for some reason, we lost all internet here for a second. So, all right. Let me jump back here. Category construction starts versus construction spends. This is our main indices when we're trying to forecast futures and what's going on. Sometimes there's a disconnect reporting construction starts versus construction spend. The actual construction spend is based on the U.S. consensus construction put in place. So the spend is that, you know, the piece of drywall was put in place and that cost is realized right there at the spend. Construction analytics is used to compare these two. Construction starts ends up being more of a variable by publisher. So the starts may have different markets and different categories. So just be careful that you understand that the starts and the spends, the categories that you're trying to look at is you know exactly where those are. So for example, Dodge has a monthly new construction start for things, you know, like airport terminals and courthouses located in what they label other institutional buildings, which is a non-residential building category. And the U.S. consensus actual spending reports for that same information in courthouses and offices. It just kind of reiterates what I was just saying, that just make sure you know where the money is if you're trying to track it. So again, make sure you know where that's located. Data, and realize that data may have to be manipulated to be able to pull that out so that you're comparing the right information. So under construction starts forecasting, construction starts is a little bit different than construction spends because it takes the total project value at the project start. So if in October you had a $10 million job start, you're reporting the full $10 million in October, whereas the spend is as you're actually spending it throughout the project. So when you hear that stat, construction starts are up, realize that that's not actually hitting our, the spend is not actually being realized yet. So some of the short-term drivers for construction starts forecasts, output trends in the sector. So when they're looking at these, they're forecasting the construction starts. They're looking at these items here, things down, even borrowing costs, capacity, population trends, disposable income. And some of the long-term drivers our employment and disposable income. So we have now moved into a new room, so we should be in a lot better shape. So the starts again was the total value at the start of the project. We went through this, some of the short-term, long-term drivers. Beware sample size. So we're at spending. Now construction spending is a little bit different in the fact that, sorry, in the fact that it takes the value of construction plus the cash forecast plus the duration. So as we get through this, the cash flow, we've all had to do cash flow projections for owners. We hate it because it's pretty much a guess, but basically there's some rules of thumb here. We've all had to do this on projects. The rule of thumb for non-residential, when you look at a construction spending forecast, is that they basically say 20% of the cost is going to be spent in the first year, 50% of the cost will be spent in the second year, and 30% in the third year. And they figure that for all non-residential construction, they kind of figure that as a typical rule of thumb percentages. So if you have a job that goes 4 years, it's 25 and 5. But you got to be aware of a couple of things with that. Again, is consistent sample size. If you're looking for growth in construction spending in a specific market, you got to just make sure that you're comparing like to like. And be aware that mega projects can skew this number. So if you got a mega big project that's in that, that may go out 5 years, say, that's really going to skew that number quite a bit. So just kind of be aware of what's behind the stats. Backlog. So backlogs are created when starts are greater than the spending for that year. That makes sense, right? Everybody says, oh, I got great backlog, which means you've booked it because you got a contract, but it's really, it's not going to really start until next year. That's the same kind of theory, just bigger in the economy. An increase in backlog could indicate longer project durations versus what the market activity is. So if you think, oh, there's a bunch of, it could be just because it's a longer project. And remember that construction spending that's happening in this current year or whatever current year you're looking at, 75 to 80% of that is coming from backlog. That's not from new starts. That's from backlog. So be aware of that. So kind of on to how construction starts are doing in general. And this is from August 21 Dodge data. So for residential, this is where we kind of get into some of the more fun things, but residential actually fell 9% in August, but that came in after 8 months higher than any other previous months ever recorded. So think about that, 8 months of growth that's ever been recorded in residential. So obviously everybody knows residential has been just screaming. The average new residential starts for 21 is 18% higher than the pandemic high. And of course, so that's looking before the pandemic hit. And then 24% over during the pandemic, which makes sense. So for non-residential buildings, this is key for a lot of us. Non-residential buildings fell 13% in August versus pre-pandemic February 2020 timeframe. So we are off 13% before the pandemic hit from if you use that as a benchmark. So we've been down from that. But the bright side is in May and June, May was up 8% and June was up 1%, but they are the only 2 months that had positive growth. In 2020, the average was 20% lower than the pre-pandemic level. So there was already signs in the market that we were going to hit a slowdown before pre-pandemic. So new starts in 21 average is 9% lower than February of 2020. So new starts in 21, almost every market is up compared to year over year of 20, which makes sense, right? During the pandemic, everything shut down. So we better be way up. So we're kind of looking at trying to compare it, maybe not so much year over year, but looking before that, so that that's a true measure of what the economy normal was, instead of looking at year over year. So be careful when you hear those or see those stats that are comparing year over year, because just the last year was just, we all know what it was. It was junk. So 21 starts compared to the pre-pandemic. So February of 2020, manufacturing is off 30%. Office building is off 13%. Lodging has been down 57%. Now, this is before the pandemic. We're not comparing it to the pandemic. Amusement recreational was off 30%. Healthcare and was up 5%, and public buildings were up 8%, and they were the only two sectors that were positive. So starts forecasting for 21 and 22, according to Ed Zorenski and his construction analytics, he says we're looking at about, for starts, about 8% growth total construction in 21 and as well in 22. So let's look at some spending, because if you're a subcontractor, you probably want to be looking at the spending, maybe even a little bit more than what a general will. I mean, the way I look at it is, I'm, as a general contractor who's, I do some BD, but with pre-con and where the markets are going, I'm looking at ABI, the Architectural Billing Index. If those hours are going up, that means the architects are drawing. That means there's stuff in the pipeline. And then I'm looking at the spends. So, I mean, at the starts. So construction spending year to date is up 7%. So sounds good. But remember, construction spending is 75 to 80% backlog from the previous year. So residential spending is up 25.8%. Non-residential spending is down 8.7%. Non-building infrastructure is down 3.8%. So some of the things to think about that Ed brings up quite a bit in his website and documents is the unknown factor of what the infrastructure bill that's getting through the government right now, what that's going to do to our markets and how it's going to boost some of that, what they're calling non-building infrastructure, and then how that stuff's all going to get allocated. So there's a big unknown out there that there's possibility that, that's going to hit multiple markets. So well, I guess I could have done all that. I just told you guys all those things, but the forecast for the end of the year, basically he's got residential is going to be up 20% total. Non-residential is going to be down 7%, and non-building infrastructure is going to be down 3%. I do encourage you, like, if you like this kind of thing, he really does on his website really does have like behind the headlines, like make sure you're looking at this. And he really gives you a really good idea of how all this economics and how this stuff is all reported, which if you want to geek out, I mean, it's a couple hour rabbit hole you can get into. You just start worming down into this stuff and hours go by. So with that, I guess that's the end. Is there, I know we kind of got all jumbled up there, but is there any questions or?
Cameron, I guess the PowerPoint for the people who are on the Zoom call, we will send out today's PowerPoint to those individuals, and then I'll make a recommendation to the board of what we'd like to do for the next month's meeting because of the snafus this week.
Yep.
So,
yeah, we can email it out.
Have Ed's website.
Yep,
Stuff.
I can put it on there.
Okay.
And we will. We can put that out there for everybody. Were there any other questions online?
There's a question in the chat.
How many?
Or John question.
Yeah.
But how many PDUs should we put in for? I don't know. Was it one for a meeting? I think it's standard.
How many PDUs do you put in for?
Today?
Yep.
I believe it's 1 per hour.
1 per hour. All right. And again, if you have any questions or anything, if you go through the PowerPoint, I'll have my stuff's on there. You can drop me a note anytime, and I'll try to get back to you.
Hey, Cameron, if you'll email me the PowerPoint, I'll make sure that all the attendees here get a copy of that. And then we'll also, this will also be a YouTube video. I'll try to cut all the chunks out of this of the lost time and make that a little compressed for the people that want to watch this in one, linear format. So.
Okay, perfect. John?
Thanks, Cameron. Great job considering the IT issues we have. Apologize to everybody that's online. We are going to, as a board, have a meeting. We'll probably get a hold of the key people here and have a little discussion, but I think I'm going to throw this out now just so everybody's aware of those who are in attendance today virtually. I'm going to put a little caveat on this. I'll let you guys, and this is going to have to voted by the board. I mean, I'm not the president with unlimited powers here, but I think the board's going to agree with me. I think what I'll do is anybody who's online today that paid for the online, you'll be allowed in next month free, as long as you bring another person. I'd like to try to get some in person because we have 5 of us in here besides Cameron. I'd like to get some in person because we got the room. Right now, there's about 8 feet between everybody in this room, and we can get down to 6 real easy. And this is a smaller room downstairs, which I'm going to check and see if this room's available on the 12th, which is our next meeting for the monthly, and it'd be part 2 of Cameron's meeting, and we will not have an IT snafu that time. So I'll make sure of that. Anyway, let's get on to the rest of the meeting stuff. Today is a very busy day for this chapter. We've got our monthly meeting this morning. Tonight, we've got a welcome reception for the regional meeting. Like I said, it's being held down in the great town of Festus. We're having the meeting at the Holiday Inn there, right at the Festus exit, which is probably Highway 30, I think. I don't know the actual highway cuts across there off the top of my head, but it's only Holiday Inn in Festus. And then on Saturday, we'll have our actual meeting with a guest speaker. And then we'll have a meeting of the attendees from the chapters in the region, which we've got 2 from Kansas City, 1 from, I don't even know the numbers off the top of my head right now because apologize, I did not have issues with this until last night when I tried to go print. Our computers went down at work and I had to get out of there. But we have a total of 10 people coming to the regional meeting. And then we're going to have a fun event afterwards with the wine, tours, and then dinner that Fred Waltrip's setting up. So I think there's still time to sign up, but the dinners and stuff, we'd have to know immediately because Freddie's got to get a reservation at the wineries, which are going to be very busy this weekend. So other than that, it's been a rough month for everybody. Hopefully we'll get this ironed out by next month. I want to remind the board with the meeting being pushed up a week to the 12th of November for the monthly meeting. I think we're going to have to push the board meeting up a week to the 5th. So if those board members are online, I'm going to have to send out a notice. Jason, if you want to go ahead and get that out now, so everybody gets it on their calendar for Friday, the 5th at noon or 11 o'clock for the meeting. Okay.
Will do.
Does anybody online have any questions?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat.
Okay. Anybody in here? I appreciate everybody coming.
Thank you.
We got one person here who's not a member, but I'm sure I can get him to sign up now. So appreciate it. Y'all have a good one, and we'll be talking this weekend, Jason, and I'll get with Cameron on next month's meeting. Appreciate it very much, Cameron.
Thank you, Cameron.
It's a great
Thank you,
meeting.
everybody.
I'm looking forward to next month.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Cameron Beattie with Russell HBD. This is part 2 of a series that I was asked to. I'm sorry, this thing on the screen, I got to figure out how to get it off. Okay. That I was asked to do. And so this is, sorry, one more thing here. I got to minimize the screen. Yep. Forecasting futures, escalations, lead times, and the central core. So the part of this about the, before I start into this, we probably need to have a few little discussion about bid ethics and just kind of a situation. Jason, if anybody has any questions or comments and can hit the chat button on that. I can't really see the chat and still see the screen. So if you want to
I'll watch the chat. Yeah.
Okay. But in bid ethics, I had a situation that one time, actually multiple times, but where, we had a bid going on, had, steady bids coming in, and then, things kind of quieted down. It was getting closer to bid time. So that meant all the mechanical contractors started sending their stuff in because it was right at the 11th hour. But
It's not our fault.
yeah, it never is. Let me guess. It's the equipment guys, right? Yeah. But where, we had a number, everybody's we're buttoning it up. And then all of a sudden you get a guy who was maybe second, third, fourth, all of a sudden his number shows up and he's, $1,000 less than what was your lower bid. And then about a minute after that, the guy who was sixth comes in at 2,000 less than that. What do you think's happening there?
I have no idea.
Hmm.
No idea. That's why we don't bid in GCs.
So what happens there is when I get that bid, I call the guy that was low and say, hey, I don't know who you just sent your bid to, but it wasn't me that shopped it. Because I want you to know that it wasn't me that shopped your bid, and make sure that I'm getting your number as early as possible because you know that it's secure when it hits my desk. Because what happened was that somebody had a buddy who had a buddy that took that bid and sent it to him and said, hey, or called him and said, hey, I'll just use some number, names, but, Rock Hill was $1,000 less than you. Okay, well, I'll do it for 2,000 less than that. And then he runs and he puts that out to all the GCs so he can get the job. And every GC is faced with this pretty much on almost every bid. It happens all the time. Not ethical. Shopping bids doesn't help anybody. It really doesn't. I don't get it. It hurts the,
And that's why we don't bid certain GCs.
and that's why I want to call you and tell you so that you know, hey, I just sent that to, XYZ GC, and he's the one that, because you'll know. I mean, you'll know by the timing who you sent it to and who sent it to somebody else, so that you can mark that. I'm not going to send them a number, or if I do, I'm not going to send them my best number. And that helps the people. And it really can be for everything, anything. I'm using mechanical just because there's a couple mechanical guys in here, and that's typical, like the large scopes, right? So it's a big chunk of a job. So it's something to be really aware of. If something smells wrong, it probably is wrong as an estimator. And anything that you can do to point out to your people that are bidding to you that it wasn't you, it'll help you out a lot. I've also seen where a contractor got sick of it and put in a really low bid, and the GC shopped it. 3 minutes before the bid was due, the guy that was low to begin with pulled his bid and said he had a mistake, and left that guy hanging low, and he couldn't do anything about it. And he's like, I'm sick of you doing it. And it happens, but it's something to pay attention to. Bid shopping doesn't help anybody, and it can't happen. You gotta have, you just gotta have ethics in it and just do the right thing. All right, guess we'll jump right into estimating futures, escalations, and lead times. All right. Again, there's our property.
How many people do we have on the Zoom meeting?
Jason, do you know how many people we had?
It shows that there are 7 people on, including you and myself.
Okay.
All right. So my screen doesn't change. Okay, so last time in the part 1, we talked about the construction starts versus spending, and how starts drives spending, but it's delayed. So the reason why I bring this up is because there's been a lot more statistics have come out in the last week and a half. So, but they revised the new starts over June and July, and to these numbers. So residential, so from what I presented before, they've revised these numbers. So residential went up 12%, manufacturing 41%. Okay, recreation took a big jump. So the reason why this is important is because this drives the spending. So what it's telling us is that the bottom of construction spending. So in this pandemic, recession, whatever you want to call it, this downturn that we've had in construction, the construction bottom of the spend is now projected to be end of fourth quarter this year instead of mid 22. So what all this is telling us is that 22 looks to be in a growth mode for just about every market, and that's not just year over year. And we'll kind of get into that. All right, so I sat in on a seminar that had ABI economist, a Construct Connect economist, and AGC Ken Symington. And it was an hour-and-a-half presentation about the next 6 months and different things to look at. And so, so what I did is I pulled some of the information out of that presentation. And the first part here is the ABI pipeline information. So this is the Architectural Billing Index. So architects are the leading indicator of construction projects that are headed down the pipeline. Okay, so they track three things. They track architectural billings, design contracts, and inquiries. So inquiries tend to be a little more not as quantifiable as it's basically when they call these guys and they say, yeah, I got a phone call from a client who asked about, so it's kind of a little more informal or, hard to be exact numbers. And then design contracts are things that you're signing up right now. And then billings are what actually is being done in your firm. So what this is tracking, you can see this slide shows all three of those indicators. So anything above 50 means that there's growth going on. So you can see that we spiked up and now we're kind of trending down, but we're still above that 50 mark, which is key. You can see the inquiries, how much higher those have gotten. So there's people that are starting to feel a little bit more confident about things and they're asking, hey, Jason, can you mute somebody? Okay. So the next item here is by region. So they break this out by region and they do it they did all 4 quarters of 2020 and they have the 3 quarters of 21. And the significance of this is that for the first time that I can remember, the Midwest is the strongest region right now for ABI activity. So usually you always hear about the coast and the South as being that's where it's going. Well, ABI says Midwest is really is actually doing the most, which I thought was a very positive. Obviously, it's very positive that we've got these numbers, but that we're beating the rest of the country. Some of that could be, people fleeing the expensive coast areas, but we are starting to see a growth for our hold on, sorry. So some more ABI pipeline. So some of the information that they put out there as well has to do with type of construction. So there's new construction, there's existing facilities. What they're seeing is the majority of the work that's in their pipeline, from inquiries to design contracts, are in existing facilities. And you can see that here. Obviously, like retail is just still way down, but in talking about why this is, I really think, and I've been down this rabbit hole a lot lately just because I geek out on this stuff. I like it. But right now you can buy buildings that are empty really cheap. Like you cannot build a new building for what you can buy these things for. I recently went at a project, and I say recently, I'm talking about Tuesday, and looked at a building, 2 buildings actually, for a project. And it was it was almost move-in ready, 100,000 square foot near Westport on 5 acres of land for $6 million. I don't know how you would build a building like that it was a concrete building, waffle slab, two-way slabs. It was insane. So we're going to see this a lot more. We're going to see where the repurposing, we already see it, like historic renovations, like downtown, we're putting, apartments in old factories. And John could probably talk a whole lot about everything that happened down at the foundry and those kinds of things, where these buildings are are available at a lot cheaper price than what it takes to build. All right, so ABI construction spending by markets. So this is from 2020 to 22. So this is pre-pandemic to what they think 22 is going to be. And as you can see in 21, office is just basically flat. It says that 0.0 or 0.1%, it's so small, you just can't see the color there. But it's starting to finally show some life. All right, so some potholes to this recovery that ABI has identified here. The big one, emerging inflation. I don't know, everybody watched the news the other day. They said, overall inflation has gone up 6.3% this last year. We'll get into some more specifics on construction input materials and, things specific to construction, but inflation in general is a major concern. Obviously, the global supply chain and commodity prices. Global supply chain, it wasn't, I don't know, very long ago that if you would have told me that a boat could get sideways in a canal halfway across the world and screw everything up, I would have told you you're insane. But now that's the world we live in. It's not just in the US, it's everywhere. The labor market, you've heard me, everybody's trying to hire. There's labor issues. The construction, I will get into that a little bit later, but the pandemic part. So construction workers in general have roughly like a 57% vaccination rate, whereas the general population is in the 80s. So we could be affected by more of these different variants that are coming out, and I'm so tired of talking about it. I'm going to move on. It drives me nuts, but and I thought this was really interesting, a potential house price bubble. So I saw the other day that the biggest thing that these mortgage lenders are doing are these cash out refis, right? And everybody's doing it because the interest rates are still low. They're worried about inflation going. You can't buy any houses anyway, so they're taking the cash out. Well, people will start to get upside down, and this thing could pop again, and we could be back at 2000. Right now, maybe it's like we're at 2006. We're at the peak. We're 2008's just coming around the corner. Something to pay attention to, because a lot of people get upside down and it bursts. We'll see what happens. So then AGC, Ken Sonington, isn't that how you say it? Sonington? Yeah. So construction materials changes. This is pre-pandemic to August of 21. So you see what's happened to the pricing of basically your construction materials. That bottom line is the bid price that contractors charge for their construction projects. And it's a, non-residential building. So, it's just an average. But if you're only raising your number by 5.2% and your inputs are up into that 30% range or 27% range, where's that difference coming? It's coming from fees and contractors holding their numbers because they don't want to, they're trying to hold on to jobs. So that gap is a big problem. It ends up being a problem because if contractors aren't passing that through to the final cost of the project, it will affect them. It's just kind of kicking the can, right?
Can we ask a question?
Yeah, dig in.
Okay, so during COVID and we had so many projects that were on hold,
Mhm.
and they were on hold for a year, 18 months. and we've had all this escalation, and we've had all this increase. How many people, and when you went back to these projects, how many people put in for the extra money just to get this job started? Because all that money is coming right out of your pocket if you're not going for it. I mean, it could be some big dollars.
It is, and that's and we'll kind of touch a little bit on that at the end. My last slide, which kind of talks about what owners and developers and they're riding the edge of a razor, right? So all of a sudden, everybody put their projects on pause around the pandemic, mainly because nobody knew what was going to happen. It wasn't really so much of a function of financing and, cost and that stuff. It was more like, where's the demand going to go? I don't want to start a construction project, say for an office building, when there's nobody going to offices anymore. So it was more about an uncertainty thing. And I think those projects that were viable now came back, they put them back out. They've had to reprice things, and then they come back and they're shocked because all of a sudden you've got these, 27% increase of materials, and, but their jobs are only going up 5%, right? Or 6.3% or whatever that is. And so we as contractors are like, holy smokes, we're getting killed with these prices. And the owners are like, well, it's like 6% overall to me. So I maybe they're able to make that happen in finance. But it changed, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Does that help?
Sure.
Okay. All right, construction inputs versus, this is just kind of what we were talking about. Now this breaks down the actual materials a little bit more specifically. If you look at pre-pandemic levels of steel mill products to August of 21, it's up 111%. 111%. And you can see where lumber did that huge spike. Everybody saw that. Now it's come back down, but it's still 52% higher than what it was before this pandemic hit. So this just kind of is a graphic representation of these different materials and the price escalations that have happened since this pandemic. And you could go through a myriad of reasons why each and every one of these have changed, but for this purpose, it doesn't really matter. Impacts that AGC has identified in the road to recovery, kind of this following the same thing that the ABI did. So there's the vaccination rates that I quoted a little bit earlier. That could be an issue. Future demand, that kind of unknown where things are going to go. The supply challenges means that people may be delaying projects, because we all know that developers and owners don't want to put out money and have construction projects drag out for 2 years. It's all about speed to market, because once they've financed that money, they want to get it spent so they can get the market. So that's an issue for them. Remodeling is a big, is something that's going to really, you're going to see a lot more of it. Less demand for retail. And the federal tax dollar spend, so the infrastructure tax bill that's been out there that everybody's been talking about, I don't know that people really understand. Like, if you asked me about an infrastructure bill like that, I'm thinking roads, bridges, water, sewer, those kind of things, right? But could it also mean affordable housing? Could it mean, so nobody really knows how that money's going to get directed, but there will be a spend there that'll be coming. So then the U.S. Chamber of Commerce put out a couple of things. This is through third quarter of 21. So these guys kind of represent like what Contractors Confidence is about the future. Like they may call Russell and say, hey, what do you think about the future? And so that's how they come up with these numbers. They put a survey out to a number of contractors. So there's three key drivers to the Contractor Confidence. Sufficient business in the next 12 months. So that went up 2 points. So people are still seeing that there's still significant projects in the next 12 months. And the ratio of average on deal backlogs is up 2 points again. Right now, the average per their survey group was about 9.4 months worth of backlog. So given the fact of where we're at, that's, end of third quarter next year, roughly, if nothing else came out. So, and then they said that their revenue is holding steady. So I don't know how to rephrase that. That's revenue. That's not profit. You can't confuse the two. So this is the part that that gets really interesting. So this is the PPI input. So this is the cost of materials that are it takes to build projects. So on the so the left column, the 20%, that was for the whole year of 2020, what those went up or down. Fabricated steel was down 0.5%. Sheet metal was down 0.3%. You can see it there. That's what it was for the last 9 months. So that would be from December of 20 to September of 21. You can see the increases that we've seen. So there's the average up top, right, is of non-residential construction went up 17.6%. And there's the individual percentages of different types of materials. And you can see there was steel, pipe, and tube went up 61%. Those are some pretty gaudy numbers. But the thing that makes them really gaudy is that in that, let's say, pick one, fabricated steel went up 44%. Well, it's up 47% for the last 18 months. So that means it was only up 3% for the first 9 months. And then this last 9 months, it went up, 44%. Like, that's insane. You see what it's kind of confusing, but so in 18 months, the total that went up is 47, but in the 9 of those months, the latest 9 months, it went up 44. So it was only up 3%. And then the last 9 months, it just exploded. Oh, see, I jumped. I should have been hitting the button. And again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about how contractors are have only raised the number that they charge for these things by less than 6%. So this could put subcontractors in a financial hardship, holding pricing just to keep business. And the insurance companies warn general contractors all the time. It's not during downturns that these companies that subs go under. It's when the economy recovers, because they've held their numbers like this. They've got low margin work to no margin work, or maybe even negative work to keep people busy. And then as the economy starts to go and people are actually able to bid some fee and stuff into their jobs, they're stuck on those bad jobs, and their people are leaving to go to other places, and then they go out. Insurance companies will hammer you on that as a general if you're talking to them. That's why you'll see, you may start seeing more requests for what your bonding capacity is, what your bonding rates are, because as we start to come out of this, there will be people that will be in a bad spot. And it's not just subs. I pick on subs because I'm not a sub, but
It happens.
it happens to generals. It happens to everybody. So, this was really interesting. This came out Wednesday of this week, so I got kind of pushed in here. But this is that final demand that was being passed on to owners. So in the last month, it's jumped up an additional 6% in the last month. So it went from being 6% to now being over 12% that we're passing on to owners. That's the biggest increase that's ever been seen in a month period since this has been tracked. I'm probably going to have a slide that says that. So you can see the average of 5 buildings is up, year over year. And there's some of the individual trades, but it was, like I said, this just came out Wednesday, and it hasn't even filtered into a lot of the other data that I've shown, because those are done quarterly or whatever. But remember I said that got Ed Zorenski.com. He's the construction analytics guy, and he reacts real fast. So like this information came out like last Thursday, and he was able to put this out this Wednesday. So he's like real time for numbers versus a lot of these other. So how do we protect ourselves with these material increases as contractors, subcontractors from owners? I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? How do we minimize our risk? So everybody said, well, we need a clause in our contract that accounts for this. So Consensus Docs has released fairly recently an amendment that you can add to your contract with the owner, and then it can be a flow down to your subs for material cost increase. Great. And finally, we're going to get this addressed.
We as a small mechanical contractor, we put a paragraph in about protecting us with the COVID and the increases and everything. And it goes back to a federal recommendation, and we put that in our bid.
So we do as well, but a lot of times it's still going to come down to it, right? So we can, like, you could quote that, but I can't like pass it on to the owner. So that's great for a sub, but we still put it in our presentation or our letters to the owners, our proposals. Everybody's got a little custom language that they've done that says, hey, we reserve the right, before we get the contract, because there's so much time gap between when we give you a proposal for a job and you go get your financing and do the voodoo that you do as an owner, and then you come back and say, I'm ready to do it. It's 60 days later. I can't get a steel guy to hold his number for 3 days, not 60. And I got to go reprice the whole thing again.
And we do a lot of direct work with owners, and we definitely when we do that, we definitely put it in there with them.
And everybody's got to protect themselves. So Consensus Docs said, we're gonna just make this, because that's what AIA or Consensus, however, whatever document you choose to use. But they came out with this amendment, and it just makes it real clear and real specific for an owner and a contractor on how to deal with these material escalations, you would think. It is not the best clause that I've ever seen at all. There's some drawbacks to this from a contractor's perspective. Okay. So there's probably not as many drawbacks from an owner's side, but from a contractor's side, I would think there's some more. So this is how it's labeled: potentially time and price impacted materials. Okay. First thing, you have to list what specific materials in a schedule are subject to this clause. All right. Doesn't seem like that big of a deal right off the top of my head, but I got a job that's 18 months long and I don't list door hardware because door hardware isn't a problem right now. But in 3 months, the ship gets sideways in a canal and all my door hardware is stuck in Israel or back in the Middle East now, but it's not on my list. So everybody says, well, just put everything on the list. Okay. Well, then an owner's just going to, so to me, that's a problem because what might be a problem down the road while the project's still going might not be known at the time you're getting to contract. Okay. 30-day written notice by each party. So this for adds and deducts. So this provision also gives the owner the right that if a material does come down, lumber would be a great example. When it was spiked, then the owner wants, hey, wait a minute, it's come down and you're still a month away from getting this wood, so something to remember when you're figuring this out. Then the biggest thing, section 3.3 caps the adjustment. So you sit there and you say, all right, the maximum add or subtract is 10%. I'm just throwing a number out there. Like it completely, at first I thought this completely negates why I would even have this clause. Because if I'm capped, I still have risk. Because when it goes up 111%, and that, what do you want me to cap it at? But then I started thinking about it. Maybe on certain things, you should be able to kind of have a good, like take steel, for example. If I'm sitting with an owner and I'm negotiating this and I know I'm going to get a contract within the next week, because that's how this has to go. It's like it's right before you're getting your final signatures. I know I'm going to be able to issue a contract to my sub within, say, 45 days. I'm just making days up, but it won't be more than 60. So you're only really projecting to lock in your costs for a shorter period of time for that material. Still don't like it. Don't like this whole clause. I think you're better off with your written paragraph that you're comfortable with as a contractor or as a sub to protect yourself. And really all you want to do is to put the owner on notice that, hey, it's a shared risk. I just want you to be fair. I want you to sit down and talk to me. These are out of my control, And if you have an owner that refuses to deal with that, then you have to ask yourself, is that a right client for you as a company? That's all I have. One thing I did not touch on in the two presentations is the core corridor in St. Louis. That construction, I guess we're going to call that the central core. It's going. I don't know. I didn't really know what to talk about with it, but where construction's headed in St. Louis, I don't know. There's a lot of talk of the convention center expansion and all that, and obviously NGA and around NGA and the new soccer park or soccer stadium, garage, practice facility, that whole thing's still going. So there's a lot of large jobs going. Yeah, right. The
New Quinny Tower.
yeah. So there's a lot of that work that is still rolling, but I think we're starting to see where we're getting a lot more of those retrofits in those areas too, and what would have been considered areas that you wouldn't have gone into that are turning into multifamily housing that were, like a printing press building or, whatever. And so keep your eye on that central core. And I guess I'm not really plugged in too much into Cortex and any major expansions that they have going on down there. There's been a few retrofits or, build outs and stuff like that, but I'm not plugged into it. So maybe there is,
John would know.
Yeah.
Their company works with that all the time.
Yeah. So if anybody has any questions. All right,
I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so
awesome.
that was a
All
really
right.
good presentation.
Well, and Jason, I will send you both presentations so you can post it. I've got them. I can email them to you.
That sounds good. Let me turn my camera back. I think that's it. So if there's no more questions, we kind of ran long in the presentation, but that was a great presentation. So, and John's not here anymore. He had to leave something urgent with his family matter. So we want to thank everyone for showing up, and either virtually or in person, and thank Cameron for both weeks of a great presentation. Thank the AGC for the technological advances they've made since last month. And
Hey, Jason, do you have a schedule what our meeting is next month?
I don't think we have one next month, do we?
there's no meeting in December. So
Yeah.
the next meeting will be in January, and let me look at a calendar real quick. It should be on January 14th, if all goes well. So it should be in the same place, AGC, and also virtual. So I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head what the topic is for January. So I'll put a posting out very shortly. If you want to, just go to our website and you can join our mailing list, or go to our Eventbrite, and every time we post a new meeting, you can see it there. So that's all I have.
Great.